বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি।
Hello everyone, welcome to Hindu Analysis for 21st August 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. ZyCoV-D, first vaccine for those above 12 gets nod. So in a bit of good news in the sense that in the fight against COVID, and also in the sense that a vaccine which was developed indigenously by an Indian firm, that is by an Indian company, did receive the first step or first go ahead for it to be used in India's inoculation drive. So whatever the vaccines that India has right now is targeted towards adults, right? Whatever the vaccines, the Bharat Biotech, the Covaxin, the Covishield, if in case the negotiations between our government and various other US manufacturers, vaccine manufacturers gets cleared, India will have other vaccines, either the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, or the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. Whatever it is, we will have vaccines for adults, right? Though the Johnson and Johnson vaccine is being tested for children, the Pfizer being tested for children, they are still in initial stages. Now, the Drug Controller General of India, the FDA type organization that gives go-ahead clearance and everything for medicines to be used in India, the Drug Controller General has granted emergency approval for the ZyCoV-D. Now, this vaccine is being developed by an Ahmedabad-based company called Zydus Cadila, and this is the first vaccine which has been manufactured in India and developed in India that can be administered to not only adults but also children who are aged above 12 years. So this will certainly help in vaccinating our younger children also, as they begin to go back to schools, where we are seeing multiple states accepting or allowing the reopening of schools, but still the parents and the teachers and the entire situation is little bit tense, because they are scared that if the kid contracts, what happens, we don't know. We are seeing some sort of uncertainty surrounding the entire school reopening and children going back to the school. Since this vaccine has been granted the emergency use, we are going to see this vaccine being administered to not only adults but also kids who are aged above 12. Again, the results are little bit vague in the sense that these are interim results from phase 3 clinical trials. We don't have the full results yet, but nonetheless, vaccine has shown a 66% efficacy in its trials, which is a good sign against COVID-19. So this is again a ZyCoV-D, which is again being developed by an Indian company based out of Ahmedabad, that can not only be administered to adults but also to children. This is again a welcome sign in ensuring India comes out of the COVID-19 pandemic. And one more vaccine is a diversified vaccine basket that again improves our chances of fighting COVID-19 in a successful. Moving on to the next article, reign of terror, never permanent Prime Minister. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was launching a new project at the historic Somnath temple on the Friday, where the launch or the opening of a Somnath exhibition center was taking place. It was being inaugurated, portraying all the important artifacts that were found and related to the Somnath temple. Now, Prime Minister used this platform to subtly make a statement on the recent developments surrounding Afghanistan, particularly related to the Taliban's seizure of Afghanistan and implications that followed that takeover. Now, he pointed out to the fact that in a subtle message, one can say that destructive and terror forces may become dominant temporarily. And again, he chose the moment as an example to make a point for his, or make a case for his statement, stating that the Somnath temple was razed, plundered and destroyed several times in the past by invading forces, but every time it was destroyed, it was plundered, it was razed, it was destructed or damaged, Every time that was done, it was again restored and resurrected to its past glory or even greater glory sometimes. And he subtly kind of pointed out to the fact that whatever we are seeing right now in Afghanistan is a temporary phase. We might think that the terror forces or the negative forces or the destructive forces have won and they have become dominant once again, and we don't have any other choice but to submit. But remember, whenever these kinds of negative or bad forces or destructive forces become dominant, they are dominant for a temporary period of time, and they are not permanent, and there will be some time for us to rebuild and rebuild with greater glory. He pointed out that forces that strive for destruction and those who follow the ideology of creating empires out of terrorism can only dominate for some time, but their existence is never permanent as they cannot suppress humanity forever. Again, this is again directly related to what is happening in Afghanistan. uh, how Taliban is using terrorism, how Taliban is using the fear of terror to take over provinces, to take over the government in Kabul and whatnot, and how Pakistan has been using terror as a tool to instill fear in its own population and also in the population of its surrounding countries. Right, that is how they use the ideologies that the followers of terrorism are so this is again they are trying to use the fear that comes out of their action to dominate on other people. And again he pointed out to the fact that they do not survive or exist for long periods of time. They cannot suppress humanity forever. Their end will come, and that is not long or far away. Their end is near. They might look dominant for some time, they might look strong for some period of time, but inevitably they cease to exist. Again, this is a good example of a mentality. This is again a good example for an essay kind of a question. Moving on to the next article, arrest is not always a must, says Supreme Court. So this is a critical judgment. This is important because this judgment might set a precedence in the future which may prevent unnecessary arrest of people for no reason at all. The Supreme Court pointed out to the fact or held that merely because the law says or allows for a police personnel to arrest somebody, the state cannot use that power indiscriminately and use it as a tool. Remember, arrest can sometimes be used and has been used in the past as a tool in the hands of the state to crush the personal liberty of an individual. Whether it may be done knowingly or it may be done unknowingly, but at the end of the day, the personal liberty of an individual is taken away. Now, personal liberty, the court pointed out or observed to the fact that it is an important aspect of our constitutional mandate. At no point of time, personal liberty of a person can be infringed upon, and though we know that certain sections or fundamental rights are not absolute until and unless the situation calls for to hinder or prevent somebody to enjoy their personal liberty to the fullest. Except those scenarios, in majority or in most of the cases, personal liberty is an important aspect of our constitutional mandate. Now, why do we arrest somebody? What is the reason or intent behind an investigation officer arresting an accused or a person he is or they are investigating? So, what is the need or when do you see the need for a person to be arrested? Right? If you see an accused who is being when you are conducting or carrying out an investigation, the need for the arrest or the need to arrest an accused person arrives when we are investigating the case, and for whatever reason the investigation officer feels that they need to investigate the accused in a custodial manner, meaning they have to take them into custody and then interrogate him. That is how the custodial investigation takes place, that they feel necessary because they need the custodial aspect of it. They need to interrogate him in or during custody, or if the crime that he is being accused of is a heinous crime, meaning that cannot it's a heinous crime, whether it may be a murder, it may be a rape, or it may be anything that is cruel, if the crime is heinous. Or the third possibility is that, or the third case when a person needs to be arrested, or investigation officer feels the needs to be arrested, is when there is a possibility that the accused might go out and influence the witnesses or tamper with the evidence, or if the case is actually tilted heavily against him, he may run away. That is, he may abscond from the investigation. So these are the three scenarios where the court pointed out that the investigation officer may use his authority to arrest accused person. But just because the law made it so, just because the law made it okay for somebody to arrest, they must be arrested on a mandate basis. Just because you have the law, a case is filed against somebody, or somebody is being accused of something, just because the law says that if so and so person is, if so and XYZ is accused of X and Y crime, the law says that the criminal procedure code says that if the person committed XYZ crime, they can be arrested. So you are simply going by the letter of the law and you are arresting without investigating first whether you need to arrest the said person or not, right? The court observed that you have to make a distinction, right? You need to justify your arrest before you use your authority to arrest somebody or use your power to arrest somebody. You need to justify the cause for the arrest in the first place, right? You need to make a distinction between the existence of power and the justification to exercise it. So that is again lies on the, or it is the duty of the investigation officer, because at the end of the day the investigation officer decides whether a person is arrested or not. The court also observed that if arrest is made routine, which is already routine, right? We kind of see the arrest being used as a tool in smallest of the small cases, right? What happens at the end of the day, if a person is arrested, their reputation takes a huge hit. Not only that, it is kind of a psychological agony that they go through. See, whether they are guilty or not, that is to be decided by the courts. Whether he is guilty or not, that is to be proved by the investigation officer, right? The Indian law says that the proof of burden lies on the police. The police must do their due diligence. The police must bring out evidence. They must investigate, and they should make a case for that person, make a case against that person in the court of law. So what happens, the court observed that if a person is arrested on a routine basis without any necessity, without any justification, just because the law says is so or law allows it for it so, it causes incalculable harm to the person, to the reputation of the person, to the psyche, that is the self-esteem of the person. See, if the investigation officer of the case feels that or believes that the accused person in the case will abscond or disobey the summons that he had been given to attend an investigation, then what is the need for that person to be arrested, right? If there is no reason to believe that he will run away or he will not even appear for investigation, then what is the point of arresting somebody? If there is a probable cause that, if the investigation officer feels the probable cause that the accused person will either run away or will not attend the interrogation or investigation proceedings when he was summoned, then if there is no probable cause and if he is actually cooperating with the investigation, then what is the need for the compulsion to arrest somebody? Why should you feel the compulsion to arrest as an officer to arrest the accused, right? The court observed in its order, which is interesting, right? You see this playing out in real life. Judgment coming out of the Supreme Court that talks about investigation officers using their power indiscriminately to suppress somebody or take. See, it's not that they are doing it in a wanton way, but just because they have the authority, whether there is a need for it to be applied or not, that kind of misses the point, and they tend to simply apply the law indiscriminately, whether it is needed or not. what policing, when we discuss about police reforms, is they need that kind of distinction between where to use it and where not to use it. See, as important as it is to impose law to the letter, following the law, implementing the law, it is also prudent and important to be aware and mature enough, and you have to know where not to invoke the law. That is where the see, if you are being vested with such immense powers, the thing that everybody looks for or hopes for in an investigation officer or a person who has been given such huge powers is that at least they should be aware of the fact, or knowledgeable enough to know where to apply the law and not apply the law. Now let us move on to the next article. This article will talk a little bit about what is happening in Afghanistan and what are the implications of the fall of Afghanistan into the hands of Taliban will have on regional geopolitics. Geopolitics is nothing but the relations and the alliances of countries based on geographical locations. It is light of one to say that the implications of the fall of Kabul are simple. On the contrary, the fall of Kabul has far-reaching implications on geopolitics of the region. Right, it is going to shape the future geopolitics of the region altogether. It will have that kind of an impact on alliances, relations, and groupings in the region. Now, one factor that we should be mindful of is the behavior of Taliban, both domestically and internationally. Domestically, in the sense, what kind of a policy, what kind of violence that they unleash on the Afghan people. So, a small clarification here. Afghani is the currency of Afghanistan. You cannot refer the people of Afghanistan as Afghani. Afghans are, or Afghan are the people of Afghanistan. Afghani is the currency of Afghanistan. I see a lot of confusion taking place surrounding me. So, I just wanted to clarify that. But getting back to the article itself, the editorial itself, how the international community is going to engage with Afghanistan or Taliban in particular is going to depend on how they behave both in domestic front and on international front. Irrespective of their behavior and well aware of their past track record in human rights, in women rights, and not only in their agendas, countries in the regions such as China, Russia, Pakistan are more than happy to engage with Taliban. They have already made efforts in that direction. They have even hosted them in their own countries over the last few years, right? They have clearly made their intent clear that they are happy to negotiate with Taliban, well knowing their past, well knowing their history, well knowing their ideologies, their intent, and their methodologies, despite being aware of their violent past, present, and by the way things are going, their future. Countries like China, Russia, Pakistan is a given that they have invested heavily in Taliban, so they are going to engage with Taliban irrespective of what Taliban does. But there are certain costs that Pakistan is not expecting that Taliban will return with interest to Pakistan, that we wait in the future, but we are not going to speculate. But nonetheless, despite knowing the ideologies and behavior of Taliban, countries like China, Russia, and Pakistan are more than happy to engage with them, right? Now, the moment Taliban overtook Kabul, a lot of equations that governed the region earlier were thrown into dustbins. Whatever the alliances, whatever the policies, whatever the posture that countries adopted towards Afghanistan and Taliban, these countries were forced to throw away their postures, their policies, their stands, as we call them, into the dustbins, because at the end of the day, Afghanistan fell into the hands of Taliban. We discussed at length various factors that led to that moment, but nonetheless, the moment had arrived, and it has been few days since that moment has arrived. Now it is high time for us to move into the future also. Let us understand what would be the fallout of that moment and how India is going to face certain consequences of this scenario. Now, what has essentially happened in Afghanistan is the moment American troops were withdrawn, or as essentially we call it, America left, a power vacuum was created. What is the common thing between China, Russia, Pakistan, and Taliban? They hate one thing, but with varying degrees. Let us say Taliban hates America from 100%. Russia hates anywhere between 80 and 90 depending on the weather in Russia, in Moscow particularly, how Kremlin feels that day. Pakistan, it's like they are more than Taliban because they played America for a thing for the last 20 years. They got all the things that they could, and again they precipitated events in Afghanistan that ensured the fall of America in Afghanistan. China, it's again depends on whether that is happening in Beijing. So it is a weather-based response to the hatred against or the anti-American sentiment that these countries hold. But the given and the common thing that we have to understand is a power vacuum has been created in Afghanistan with the leaving of the Americans. And these countries, China, Pakistan, and Russia, are trying, essentially, Taliban also at the end of the day, are also trying to fill that vacuum which was left by the Americans. Right? The person or the country that occupies that power vacuum or tries to fill that power vacuum with a greater say will have a greater control over how the region operates, how the region functions in the future. So to make it simple, whoever fills the gap that was left behind by the Americans will have a greater control over the region and the future geopolitics and the trajectory of the region, right? They can kind of decide the contours of the region's geopolitics based on their own individual and common interests. If China, they want their Belt and Road Initiative to be a successful, and they are going to do everything in their power to ensure that that happens, and they have already made strides in that direction, and we are seeing certain changes in the region that are taking place that are in favor of the Belt and Road Initiative. So as I said, what kind of unites all these countries and the Taliban is there? Deep anti-American sentiments. They have anti-American sentiments. As I said, depends on whether how the weather is in Moscow or Beijing or in Islamabad or Rawalpindi, wherever the ISI operates from. But nonetheless, they are united by the deep anti-American feelings. And since day one, they wanted America out of this region. And finally, America is out of this region. So when you see that axis forming, the China, Pakistan, Russia, Taliban axis forming, leave out Taliban for now, China, Pakistan, Russia axis forming, US has two options, right? In order to achieve its goal of stabilizing the region to ensure peace, right? Or to prevent future attacks on American soil, if the interests of US and these axis powers, the new axis powers, align, right, US is going to engage with these countries and try to find new ways to work with these countries so that they stabilize the region. One, two, they try to prevent future attacks emanating out of Afghan soil. So where does this leave India? So if US, for whatever reasons, for their own benefit, becomes diligent and willing to engage with China, Pakistan, Russia, and Taliban, they are already engaging. Whatever the axis that we are seeing, China, Pakistan, Russia axis, if US is willing to engage with them in the future, the question rises: what does this mean for India? If US aligns with those Axis powers, you have to call them Axis because they are against Indian interests in the region and the world, but nonetheless, what would happen to India? What this means for India? The first thing that we can make out is when America left, the biggest winner in this scenario is China, right? If China successfully fills the power vacuum left by the Americans in Afghanistan, whatever the Chinese have been trying to do to India for the last decade or so, where they were trying to encircle India, it would become successful, right? Afghanistan was kind of the choking point that India was hoping where they would prevent such thing from happening. But nonetheless, with that thing gone, with Afghanistan gone from the reaches of India, remember, this is the hypothetical thing. This is not happened yet. So don't get panicked and everything. This is not happened, but things are moving in that direction. But mind you, India has few options left where India can maneuver. But India has to maneuver in a very intelligent and diligent way. India cannot take rash decisions at this point of time. The room to breathe for India is little, but we have still room to breathe and maneuver, and if policymakers are intelligent, they can make it work. But nonetheless, the encirclement of India is kind of happening, and this is one step towards that direction, right? This is a possibility. Don't get panicked right now. Now, what is the bigger challenge staring in front of India? Right? The biggest existential crisis that everybody is talking about is terrorism and extremism in the region. What is going to happen to Kashmir? What is going to happen to that? What is going to happen to this? We are reading articles, we are seeing news, we are seeing photos where weapons are trickling down into Afghanistan, into Kashmir from Afghanistan via Pakistan. See, the reality is we are going to see an increase in number of incidents in Jammu and Kashmir and in other places. But we are better prepared, we are more aware than before, but nonetheless there is a scope for increase in number of incidents and violence in our country, particularly in the upper reaches of our country. That is okay, but we'll discuss that later. But right now, that is one challenge that India has to navigate through, and hopefully we are doing that. So now the second thing that Taliban essentially did was that they released all the terrorists who were arrested, irrespective of their group, Al-Qaeda, JLEM, whatever different names, but same people. So whatever that who were arrested and were rotting in jails, Afghan jails, Taliban released them. So what has happened is, whoever were arrested were put in jails. They are free now, and this has kind of emboldened or enabled other people with similar mentalities to act out of their line. Right? This ensured that there is a hiding place for these people in Afghanistan. They can carry out their dreadful deeds in other countries, and they can run away and hide in Afghanistan. That is what this essentially tells. Now, the real ground situation is, every country in the region is afraid that Taliban is going to allow terror organizations to operate from Afghan soil against their countries. Tajikistan is thinking that thing, Uzbekistan is thinking in the same lines, Iran is also thinking in that same lines, Pakistan is also thinking in the same lines. Mind you, I told you, right, in future Pakistan will have some repercussions from Taliban actions in present. They might be celebrating now. There will be a time in the future where Pakistan will regret its support to Taliban, right? There will be a time, but that is for another discussion. But nonetheless, everybody is afraid that, including India, though we share a border through Pakistan occupied Kashmir, but nonetheless, even China is worried what will happen to their Xinjiang province, where they are worried that Taliban is going to encourage terror organizations to flourish in Xinjiang province of China. So what this essentially did was or led to was to protect their own countries, to protect their own security. Countries are making private deals with Taliban. Right? The idea is that, like how America made a deal with Taliban where we are going to pull out, but you are not going to attack us. Similarly, countries, regional players are making private deals so that terror organizations will not be hosted that are targeting those respective countries. Let us say Tajikistan is making a deal with Taliban in private, where the deal is that for whatever exchange of something or money or whatever it may be, or legitimacy or recognition, Taliban will not encourage terror organizations that are against Tajikistan. That is the deal. That is how deals are being negotiated right now with Taliban. With the current regional developments, with the international developments, or whatever we call it, the international community might not have any other choice than to come to terms with a Taliban regime. Right? Tell me which other country is willing to get entangled in Afghanistan? Do you see China getting involved? I don't think so. Do you see Russia getting involved again? No. Do you see America coming back? The chances are low, but possibility, but very, very low. So, who is going to intervene? So, that question brings out the other question. Does the international community have any other option but to recognize Taliban? The answer is no. They have to recognize, and we are seeing countries running to recognize. Now, as I said, that line keeps repeating. Pakistan is jubilant right now that Taliban took over, right? The Prime Minister of Pakistan made this comment that Taliban liberated Afghans from the slave mentality or whatever. So again, this jubilant temperament from Pakistan celebrating the Taliban victory is going to come back and bite them in the back itself. Pakistan is going to kind of taste their own medicine, as one puts it. The reality right now is that not only anti-Pakistan terror organizations, any organization against any country are emboldened. They feel that they have a safe haven from which or from where they can operate and sustain from. Right? That is one thing that is happened. But mind you, being the closest neighbor and being a big catalyst in the events that followed in Afghanistan, Pakistan is going to get its own due in due time. But nonetheless, the threat of terror organizations is not only limited to Pakistan but also to other countries in a great extent and a great deal to India. Right? That is well established and that has to be agreed. Now, what is India's future in this region? With the fall of Afghanistan, India had its hopes pinned on Central Asia. That is gone. See, the idea of India's concentration of Central Asia was already struggling, was already kind of disabled, in the sense that we were struggling to establish a network with Iran. Iran was not helping. The Chabahar port was a non-starter to begin with. The road that we built in Afghanistan connecting to Chabahar port, the Iranians were denying us that last mile connectivity to connect that highway to in Afghanistan. See, the Iran side, we have a lot of challenges. Pakistan is right. This author of this article suggests that India make peace with with Pakistan. Right, absolutely agree. There is a possibility of a peaceful coexistence. One should vigorously pursue that. But given the history between both of our countries, and given the history of Pakistan during the times of crisis and during times of negotiations, a peace deal between India and Pakistan is entirely dependent on Jammu and Kashmir. Right? The politics of Jammu and Kashmir do have an implication, but not to the extent that right, there are a lot of issues that have to be settled to pursue a peace deal between India and Pakistan. Now, as I said, India is at a critical juncture. India must pursue a strategy that is aware and mindful of all these developments that are entirely tilted against India and in favor of Pakistan and other countries vis-a-vis China. Russia, at this point of time, we discussed at various points of time, Russia is a junior partner of China, right? Whatever China sneezes, Russia is there to wipe it off with their kerchief. So again, India is alone. That is what the thing that this article kinds of points out. India should be aware of the developments that are taking place. India must be mindful. India must be awake. And India has to learn, and India has to fight its own battles. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি।